We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, welcome to the Supernatural Hour podcast. This is your host, Raven.
I'm Rogue.
Here's Emmett.
This is Doc.
And I'm Chad.
Okay, so our main topic tonight, I'm actually really looking forward to it. So it is brought to you by Oteos, and they're fabulous, and we still have to go eat there again. If I can eat anything, I can't eat carbs anymore, so I might have to watch you eat stuff.
Okay.
All right.
I'm good
There's
with
always
that.
dessert. There's always ice cream.
But I can't do any carbs.
Any sugar. It's not just the glutens.
Yeah,
And
I can't
wheat.
do
Okay,
sugar.
you're doomed. You're doomed.
I know,
That's
right?
it for you.
I'm just
That's
glad
it
that
for you.
steaks don't have carbs.
Enjoy the Diet Coke.
All right. So we're actually tonight going to talk about Anneliese Michel. I want to say Michael, but it's German, so I think Anneliese Michel. And she is... So if you've ever heard of the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose, that movie was based on this gal, Anneliese Michel. And I've never seen the movie Exorcism of Emily Rose, and we didn't watch it because this podcast isn't supposed to be a movie review. We want to talk about the actual person. Maybe we'll do a movie review later. But this is about the actual person. And I mean, I feel bad for her. You know, everything that she had to go through was terrible. But the situation as a whole, to me, I found fascinating. So,
This is all new to me. I'd never heard of her before or the movie, so
Oh, really?
this is new to me.
It's
Yes.
rare that I have heard of a movie that other people have not. So I'm super excited.
And I knew of the
There you
movie,
go.
but I didn't know of the origin story for it.
Mhm.
The origin story with the Anneliese Michel was new to me.
Yeah, and that's fascinating too. You know, because it has a medical beginning. It seems, or
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is one that Chad and I, as we were researching it, because I got to, have a thrilling Saturday just sitting in bed all day because I felt like crap. So we watched several, different clips, and, it kind of brings into everything about possession, and, we had all these discussions of, is she possessed? Was it medical? Anyway, let's just jump into it. So she was born in Germany in 1952.
I think it was 52.
In the early
Yes.
50s.
September 52.
Mm-hmm. And, just perfectly normal little girl, grew up in a fairly strict, staunch Catholic family. Her mother was a little on the super strict
Side.
side. The mother had actually gotten pregnant, had an illegitimate...
Out of wedlock?
Yeah, illegitimate child. And the child ended up dying when it was about 6 years old.
I think so.
And anyway, the mother made everybody, sleep on the hard, cold floor and do all these things to atone for, her illegitimate child. And so I didn't go into like the other siblings, but Anneliese just had this real... she grew up thinking, I just have to atone for everybody in the world's sins. And that was her mindset. She slept on she did all these things to atone for other people. And I wanted to say that was Christ's job. You can just sleep in the bed. But, we get into the religious aspect there. So, her growing up childhood was... I mean, she wasn't, beaten. I mean, it was a loving family. They just were very, very strict.
They just had very strict religious beliefs, and like other people when they're looking at other people's religious beliefs, go, "Wow, that's way out there."
Yeah, I'm going to be like, no, Christ atoned for our sins, so I'm asleep on the bed, Mom. Thanks a lot. But everyone has different beliefs. So when she, she went off to college. Was a good student, was doing well, but then she started having these bouts of epilepsy. And so, her parents
That's what she was diagnosed with.
Yeah, that's what she was diagnosed with. Started having seizures. Parents took her to the doctor because even though they might be a little extreme religiously, they were still good, loving parents.
And this is relatively recent. This is modern times and modern medicine. We're not talking about the 30s or the 40s. This is very recent.
Right. Yeah, this would have been. I mean, she was born in 1952, so this would have started when she was about 20. So it would have been, the early
60s,
70s.
70s. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the other things about this one, kind of like the Rain Man, this is an interesting one because it's well documented. A lot of paranormal things that you hear about, there's not great documentation on it. But this one, like our Rain Man episode, where there's, credible people and there's, we're going to talk about it later, but there was a trial around this. There was medical doctors around this. There's all sorts of things. There's priests and there's, dates and times and locations, and there's even recordings, of many of the exorcisms. So it's fascinating because sometimes in the paranormal, you don't get the detail. And this one you do.
Yeah, this one was very, very detailed. So her actual diagnosis that she got in 1973, she was diagnosed with psychosis caused by epilepsy. And they put her on medicine. And she had been on medicine for about 5 years. And I think this was, so the 5 years was prior to
Yeah, it was like
73.
67 when she first started having some of these epileptic seizures.
Right. So 67, she gets put on some medication. At one point, they changed the medication because it didn't seem to be working. And it was in 1973. She'd been on the medicine for about 5 years. That's when she started to get kind of depressed. She started to withdraw from her family a little bit, which if you go into and study possession, and we've talked about it here and there on different podcasts, but one of the later signs of possession is starting to withdraw from your family and starting to do things that are unusual.
So Doc, it's not unusual, though, for people to be on a medication and then to have to make adjustments to that. Is that correct?
That's pretty normal. You got to find something that works, and sometimes you can try medications that actually can amplify or make certain things worse before you find something that's effective.
So it wouldn't be unusual in this case for, something to be effective for a little while and then not to be as effective.
Oh, that's pretty common, actually.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I was just looking through my notes. It says her first seizure was when she was 16 years old, which would have been 1968. That's when she had her first seizure. So it's interesting. One of the first things that her mother noticed was that, Anneliese herself said that one of the first things that she started noticing, aside from the seizures, was knocking. She would hear knocking in her closet, on the walls, and her siblings even said, yeah, we heard the same knocking. But one thing that the mom noticed is she would, Anneliese would be in a room and she would just be staring resentfully at a statue of the Virgin Mary, and then her eyes would just turn jet black. And again, this is another one of the signs of possession is, just really having an aversion to religious icons and religious items. She said that she could see devil's faces and she could hear voices, and the voices would tell her that she was damned and that she was going to rot in hell. And, coming from such a devout family, who spent their time trying to atone for sins of other people, this, did not sit well with her. Not only was she trying to atone for her own sins, but she was trying to help everybody else, alleviate their sins. The last place she wants to go is rotten hell.
Was any of this behavior documented at the time?
Sorry, that whole rotten hell kind of prompted that.
Rotten hell, you think of me? As far as
No, just the
just the kind.
yeah.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, a lot of what we saw or, were the recordings and listening to the recordings that were done. But they did talk in a lot of the documentaries about
Okay, yeah, because
these
remember,
things.
I'm new to this. I haven't seen this, so I didn't know how much of this is just all. I thought, did they make this movie just from stories and word of mouth, or was this actually?
Listening to her voice when she was speaking the name of the 6 demons that possessed her body, it was otherworldly for sure.
No,
there was definitely no.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that wasn't her putting on an act.
Yeah,
Definitely.
not at all.
So, she started having all these little signs, and the mom started noticing something, and she's back and forth to doctors, and her actions just got really bizarre. And one of them was superhuman strength. They say that she had an apple in her hand, and with one hand squoze it, and the apple just exploded. And we actually watched one YouTube video where there's these 2 guys telling the story and telling what happened. And they weren't necessarily trying to debunk it, but they, they're like, oh, squeezing an apple,
Oh, anybody can do that.
Anybody, yeah. And so the one guy took it and he was squeezing, and they took both hands, squeezing. He couldn't, and he was a big guy, and he couldn't do it. And then one of the things that she did was she climbed under the table and barked like a dog for 2 days. And when I was
straight, right? She didn't even sleep. That was 2 days straight.
Yep, 2 days straight. And when I first wrote it down, I'm trying to write fast, and I wrote 2 hours because I heard the guy say 2, and then he goes days, and I was like, what? I had to rewind it and listen again. I said, did he say days? And yeah, 2 days barking like a dog. Another thing that they said she did was had superhuman strength. At one point, she picked up her little sister and threw her across the room like she was a rag doll. So the first time that they really thought, hey, maybe this isn't just epilepsy, maybe this isn't medical, they had actually gone on a religious pilgrimage, and they had a family friend that went with her. And it was, I can't remember where it was, but it's someplace that they thought that the Virgin Mary had appeared. And this Virgin Mary sighting has not been confirmed by the Catholic Church, but so many people believe in it that it's kind of a pilgrimage area. And she went with a family friend. And as they're walking to the pilgrimage site, she kind of started showing some revulsion. She didn't want to get off the bus. Then when they got her off the bus, the family friend came and got her off, and she just was not wanting to walk there, kind of really begrudgingly. They get her there, and I guess one of the things that you did there is you drank some of the water that was there because, it was holy. And she went to drink the water, and she said, I can't drink this, it stinks. The water stinks. And even as they were approaching, she was showing fear the closer she got to this, holy area. And at that point, the friend contacted the parents and said, I think you need to call a priest. There is something going on here that's just not right. She'd been to see the family doctor. They'd been to see a neurologist, and she'd been under their care. The family doctor was a fellow by the name of Dr. Vogt, V-O-G-H-T, Vogt. And then the neurologist, his name was Dr. Luthi. And they finally, got a hold of a man by the name of Father Alt, and he came over, and she was doing things like eating spiders and flies. She'd peed on the floor and licked it up.
Yeah.
I know, that just sounds tasty, doesn't it?
That's even too much for Andrew Zimmern on his show. So.
Oh, yeah, and he eats some nasty things.
Oh, he's the kid that, as an aside here, I'm sorry, was, eating worms on the school playground, right, for money. So, anyway, go on.
Yeah, and she, she was doing some self-harm. She would rip her clothes. She would attack her family. She would run through the house having fits. She would run around yelling, and not just yelling, but she would just yell horrible, horrible, dark, blasphemous things. And if you've ever heard or seen like an actual demon, hopefully not in person, like on TV or something. We've had a couple instances within WISPs and Advanced Paranormal where we've had demonic entities speak to us, and they talk to us in Latin. And when you translate it into English, it is just the most foul things that you could even imagine. And so that's how she would talk.
Your mother was a hamster.
Yes, exactly. Stuff just like that.
And so this Father Alt was the first one to recognize it as a demonic possession.
Yeah, he came over and witnessed and, talked to the family, found out what was going on, and he called the Catholic Church and said, yeah, we got to do something. So they actually got the exorcisms.
But it took a while.
It did. It's not like a couple days. It takes...
Yeah, the Catholic Church just doesn't jump right in on exorcisms right away. It's quite a process to get to actually do an exorcism.
Right. So they finally got the okay, and they actually did, over the course of a year, they did 67 exorcisms on her. And I think they said 32 of them are recorded. They did 67 exorcisms in 10 months, and I believe 32 of them are recorded. But the recordings, it's interesting. They said, while they're talking to it, so as you're listening to these, they're in Germany, right? So
and they're in German, right?
Everything's in German. The spirits are speaking in German, so you have to watch some subtitles. When Chad was first watching these, I was doing some other stuff, and I said, "Shouldn't those have been in German?" He's like, "Why? What language did you hear?" I said, "I thought I was listening in English." He's like, "Well, you've got the gift of tongues." Yeah, I wasn't. I just can't do two things at the same time, apparently.
Yeah, because it didn't sound like English to me at all.
So when we rewound it, it's like, yeah, no, that's totally German. But you can find several on YouTube where they
put the subtitles,
so you can hear what they're saying, and it is just awful. But the spirits that she says, or that were in here, that were talking through her, were Hitler, Cain, Nero, Judas Iscariot, Lucifer, and then a fellow named Fleshman,
who was a defrocked priest, like in the 13 or 1400s, that had been a bad in the Catholic Church. I mean, he's a known,
This is like Hell's Dream Team.
Pretty much. So when we were talking about, the names of the demons that said that they were in her, it's interesting because from my research and, pretty much well known across the paranormal landscape, even if you've watched the Conjuring movies, if a demon tells you its name, you have power over it. So these names, I don't think were the names of the actual spirits that were in her.
That was the first thing I thought, too.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to come up with the most evil names they could think of, just to say,
exactly,
we are so evil, we might as well be this.
Right.
And one of them that I listened to, and they're talking about it, and they kind of get back to that I Am Legion, when Christ threw the demons out of the pigs, out of the swines, and one of them actually kind of mentioned that, and the idea of it was more of, I'm the one that's been in these people. I'm the one that's been, with those different people, that was possibly the demon that was infecting and possessing them.
Right, but I don't think they're going to actually give you their name, and they're just like, here, we'll just give you these names to let you know that we're bad dudes. And the interesting thing, too, is as you listen to each one has its own cadence and its own... it's the same voice because they're using the same vocal cords, but, I've done a lot of stuff with ear. I'm a music teacher. I worked dispatch for Highway Patrol for several years, and I got used to hearing the troopers' names. I could tell you which trooper was which just by their voice. And, I don't claim to be a famous or professional audiologist by any stretch of the imagination, but when you listen to these voices, they're different. They are different entities. It's not her faking it. It's creepy.
Wow. Each voice comes from its own consciousness.
Yeah. The way they say words, the way the way they phrase things, kind of the idiom of their speech, the swing of their, you know how each people have a different walking gait. It's almost like everyone had each one of these demons when they would talk, when they took their turn, almost
Individualized.
had a very individualized speaking gait, as it were, which made it for me all the creepier. Yeah, so what did you guys think about the voices when you were listening to stuff?
Well, for me, I felt like what we were saying earlier, that there was no way that she was making this up, that they were very kind of evil, deep, dark, and nothing that a young lady was coming up with.
No.
And then to go from like Lucifer, like we were saying, Lucifer to Hitler, like there was different tones, there were different voices in there. Definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, there were some recordings of her just with her normal voice. And her voice was just kind of a typical high-pitched,
very pleasant
voice. And, I've been singing in church before, and you hit a really high note, and you try to drop it down an octave so you can reach it, which I can do a lot better when I'm sick. But the depth that her voice went, it's like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that on your own.
I was watching a documentary at like 2:00 in the morning about this, and as soon as those voices came on, my wife woke up and was like, "What the hell are you watching?" I grabbed the remote to turn it down as low as I could because it was creepy.
It is super
Funny
creepy.
you should say that.
But yeah, my wife literally, she woke up from sleep and looked over and was like, "What are you watching at 2:00 in the morning?" Actually.
Like, well, it's not porn, so okay. Emmett, what were you saying?
It's like she said,
After
"What the
that.
hell are you watching?" And I'm like, well, funny you should say that.
Hell.
Exactly.
Actually. I was looking through my notes, for something else, and actually earlier I said that 32 of the exorcisms were recorded. It was 42. So there's 42 of the 67
out of 67
were recorded. Yep. So besides the voices, when, again, we haven't dealt with any deep, dark demonic entities, thank goodness, and hopefully
We've had some that have been
don't.
pretty dark.
But we've had some that have been pretty dark, and we have had a couple.
Not like this.
No, we've had a couple instances where someone has been jumped into for a moment. And, one of the things while they're doing these recordings of these exorcisms is she's contorting herself. And if you've ever seen someone with a demonic entity inside of them, they move in ways that people ought not move.
Unnatural.
Ought not, I like saying that.
Ought not.
Ought not makes me sound fancy. They don't move in normal ways. And it's really, really surreal and creepy and spooky to watch. And so if you get online and you're watching some of these movies about her, because I know y'all are going to, because you want to hear these creepy voices. At least I do. And I feel bad for her. Don't get me wrong. I realize it was a terrible, terrible thing for her to go through, but it's interesting to hear those voices. But these kind of entities, they do not know how to take care of a body. They don't know how to move a body. And so, during these 10 months when she was just full on possessed and going through all these exorcisms, a lot of self-harm. She stopped eating. She would bite holes in the walls. They would put holy water on her as part of the exorcism, and she would scream, and this is when her body would contort. She smashed her head through a window.
Yeah, a lot of the photos are just haunting.
Oh,
were any doctors consulted during the exorcisms, or did medical science wash their hands in this case?
I think they had pretty much washed their hands, and they had moved in from the medical arena because that's where they started into the spiritual arena.
And one doctor actually at one point said, I think you need to contact a priest, which is one of the things that put into their heads, maybe we should call a priest. But he later recanted that and said, no, I didn't say that.
I mean, when the doctor says call a priest, that's, that sounds kind of final to me.
Yeah, when they're like,
There's
yeah.
nothing more we can do for you from a medical standpoint.
So, Doc, have,
Right.
Doc, have you ever gotten to the point where you're like, nah, call your priest?
I've called a chaplain before, but
little different circumstance.
usually under different circumstances. I've not performed any exorcisms in the emergency department.
Well, that's good. Let's keep it that way. So, one of the things, like you said, if you go and listen to these, it shows pictures of her in her last days, and I am just heartbroken for this poor little girl. They said that,
Isn't she like about 50 pounds or something? She's just rotted to nothing.
yeah, she actually died of malnutrition and dehydration because she would not eat after a certain point. But they also said that at the time when she died, her knees were smashed because as part of her, what these demonic entities were doing to her, she would do about 600 genuflections a day.
I went to Catholic school, and I remember doing 600 genuflections a day.
But under your own power. Yeah, she
I
would.
was.
Oh.
That's bizarre.
So do you want to explain what a genuflection is?
Yeah, it's just like you kneel down on one knee, as a sign of respect, and ask for a blessing as you before you enter a pew in the church.
But see, what these demonic entities are going to do, though, is they're going to actually mock it and do it in a mocking way. And so they were,
Right.
they weren't just kneeling; they were slamming her into the ground. Because you're not going to. Did you do it so hard that you broke your knees?
Oh no! In
Okay.
fact, we did. I seldom made it halfway to the ground.
Yeah, and she had all sorts of open
I
sores.
faked it.
You faked
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
I probably would have done
600,
okay.
600 times a day. That's a lot.
No, yeah, six.
Yeah.
And was it 600 an hour or 600?
I think it was a day, but
Oh,
and considering that she was
in an hour,
so malnourished, and it just
right? Where's the energy coming from?
just
No,
wreaked havoc on her
It
body.
was like just physical torture is what it was.
Absolutely. Yeah, she had open sores, black eyes, and just around her mouth and nose, just black and blue and sore.
And teeth broken and chipped, and some of the photographs of her, you look at the original pictures of her, when she's, like her college pictures or the high school picture, whatever it was, and she's a very pretty, young woman, and by the time she passed in 1972.
76, I believe. 76.
76. I mean, she looks like she's a haggard old woman.
Yeah. Some of the other things that she saw, she would see demon faces superimposed on her family members. She started breaking pictures in the home, very staunch Catholic home, so they had a lot of pictures of Christ, a lot of Virgin Marys, a lot of rosaries. She would break those and throw them. She got suicidal, which is something that in possession, that's kind of the
End game.
It's kind of the end game. That's what they want you to do, because demonic entities think that if they can get you to commit suicide, that they've won. But they don't understand everything going
Take over
on.
that body, right?
Yep.
They just want that body.
And another interesting thing is not only she, but other members of the family claim to smell the smell of burning feces around.
Wow.
So here's some of the things that I also found interesting, and to me also point to actually being possessed as opposed to everything being medically, induced, is when they were talking to her, they would ask, these different entities questions, and when she said that she was Fleshman, she was telling the priest all these things about Fleshman, and he looked at her parents and said,
There's no way that she would have
Yeah.
known any of that about him. That wouldn't be part of your normal Catholic upbringing.
Yep. So some of the things that I found interesting as far as what these entities would say, the priest asked the entity if it feared the rosary, and it said yes, and the priest asked why, and it says because it is, no, I will not say it. He wouldn't
He wouldn't give the reason.
Wouldn't give the reason. Every time they talked to an entity, it would refer to itself as we, and I believe it's because there was more than one in her. They would say things like, naturally the work goes on, which if you're religious, that could mean a couple different things to you. It means something to me, but I think that there is work going on continuously, good and bad. One of the things they said was, by command of him above, which I thought was interesting. But this is the most interesting thing, and I actually played this little segment about 15 times. Chad started to get annoyed because I wanted to write it down exactly. But one of the entities inside of her said, guardian angels are day and night near you, behind you. Today, people do not believe in guardian angels. Guardian angels are my enemies. I hate them. So I found that one interesting, more than most of them. Most of it was the entities, the priest asking the entities, different things. And a lot of the times the entities didn't want to give the answers. They wouldn't give their names. They kept saying all the time, no, I don't want to say it. But oftentimes it was just foul and vulgar and, saying things like they wanted her to kill herself and they wanted her to die and blaspheme against God, blaspheme against Mary. Most of it's just foul. But I don't know. Dealing with Charles as my spirit guide, another word I would call him would be a guardian angel, absolutely. And in a religion where I believe heavily in guardian angels, I found that quote fascinating.
Yeah, I would think if you believe in demonic possession, logic would dictate that there are also guardian angels, right?
Absolutely. There's got to be black and white and opposition in all things. And if you've got one, you've got to have something on the other end of the spectrum. So anyway, as of, with everything going on, it was July 1st, 1976 that she finally passed. And the cause of death was dehydration and malnutrition because she would not eat the last little while. And that's when, during the autopsy, they found all these broken bones and all these things. They buried her. And then the parents and the clergy, and I think, did a doctor? Or was it just the parents and the clergy that actually went to court? They charged them for...
Yeah, they were charged for negligence and,
And the parents and the clergy, they're trying to say, no, we were trying to take care of her. And they tried to explain to them, listen to these recordings, but, in 1973, it's not going over too big. And they were convicted, but didn't actually end up going to prison.
Well, they were convicted to, I think it was a 6-month sentence. And most of that was...
Then they served 3, I think.
Yeah, I think the priest served 3, and I think the parents, they said that they had suffered enough with their child that they didn't need to serve the time. They were like on a probation.
Priest did time for an exorcism?
Right? You would think
Wow.
that the Catholic...
Well, it wasn't for the exorcism. It was for not taking care of the needs of the child, or in this case, the young adult.
As a direct result of the exorcism.
Right, but it was a negligence, or that they should have got them into medical attention.
Yeah, and I don't know. That would.
And I can't argue with that verdict from the standpoint of saying.
The prosecution said she would have survived if they intervened even a week before her death, right?
Right, but I'm thinking, it would be frustrating as a parent to say, yeah, but and I wasn't there at court when this all went down. I was like 3, but. Yeah, I think as a parent, it would be so frustrating to say we had her on medical intervention. We had her on, this doctor and that doctor and this medicine, and then we switched medicines, and it wasn't getting better. It would just be infuriating to me.
Yep.
Well, and that's where with the doctor, when they said, did you really tell them to go see a priest? He's like, no, I didn't say that. What are you talking about?
Exactly.
Wasn't my idea.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be.
There's no code for seeing a priest. I wouldn't. We don't know how to code that.
And Doc, is there a code for go see your priest?
No, we talked about the evil eye.
But not go see the priest code?
I'm not a and I can't put in a consult to exorcist.
Insurance won't cover it.
Darn.
It's going to be an out-of-pocket expense for you.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, a little spare note.
You can't even use your HSA on it. I'm
It says
sorry.
it's only priest. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Can't use health savings account funds.
Oh, ouch. Yeah. So anyway, a very sad ending, but interesting. When you're looking at it from the point of actual demonic possessions, it's a very fascinating case. Oh,
So when was the movie made? What time frame was that?
The 2000s
Yeah, I don't know.
or something.
So pretty recent.
yeah,
not
it's
that
it's
old.
it's recentish.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's see. We're Wikipedia it, right? Aren't we?
So one of the interesting things before we finish up on this, I forgot to go into it, but as part of the parents trying to push their case of no,
Validate
she
it.
was she was possessed, they exhumed her because the thought process was a possessed body won't decompose and it will be preserved better than a non-possessed body, which to me sounds a little
Out there?
out there. And so they exhumed her, but the authorities wouldn't let anybody see her
Or the pictures.
or the pictures. So we don't know. They did exhume her. We don't know.
And they had her buried on their property also.
Yeah.
They moved her from the original graveyard where she's at to their property.
And the house that she was buried at eventually was abandoned for several years. And then didn't it burn down?
I don't remember that part. I didn't hear that.
Okay, I could be wrong, but I believe that the house after a while sat empty, and then I think it burned down. I don't think it's there anymore.
Interesting.
Good night, my haunty friends. Stay spooky.
Love you, Nicholas.
See you next time.
Have a good one.
Hey, have a good night.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright by Advanced Paranormal Services.